Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Getting Close Up, the show focused on independent artists and creatives. I'm your host, Danielle Cox, and since you're here, go ahead and join the GCU fam today by clicking the like button, subscribing, and making sure you ding the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I'm so excited to introduce you to my next guest. You ever hear somebody sing and it makes your face scrunch up and you want to throw things at them? You want to throw your stuff, other people's stuff? Well, that's what my guest today does for me when I hear her sing. She is a singer, songwriter, a storyteller, and a beautiful soul. Today, we're getting close up with Delaney Brunk. Hey, girl.
Hey, what's up?
And just to put it out there, if you ever wondered if something was whizzing by your face when you were singing, it was me. I threw it.
I've also had other people throw things at me.
Okay,
so. Yeah. Yes.
It's a compliment though. Like it's a cultural thing for sure, but it's a compliment. Like we're not trying to hurt you. We just want you to know how much we care.
I literally
projectiles.
The first time I ever sang Crocodile Tears at a performance, I had a friend who was recording the performance for me, and in the background you could hear it. One of them go, "I'm gonna throw my shoe at you," and I just like listened to that part over and over again because I thought it was so funny. But yeah,
and we're definitely gonna talk about that because that song, the first time I heard you sing, it was that song.
Interesting.
And I love it. When I first heard it, it hit me in the heart because you come out swinging in the first verse.
Yeah.
And I love now having heard you sing it millions of times. I love seeing other people's reaction to hearing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Like they're eating, they're minding their own business, and then you kick off and they go, and they kind of look around for confirmation. Like, that's her, right? Like, are we seeing this? I'm like, you saw it. You synced it. I synced it too.
You heard it?
You heard
All
it?
the things.
You heard it and you synced it too. So, all right, Superwoman, let's talk origin story. Tell me a little bit about your background. You mentioned to me that you were a military kid.
I was a military kid. Moved around a lot because of it. I was only a military kid for like 3 years. But
that's a lot for a lot of change.
Yeah.
It's enough time for enough change.
Well, and then I'm sure we'll get to like mental health and stuff later too, but my mom was also a little mentally ill. So she also moved us around a lot too. But yeah, I went to 11 different schools between kindergarten and 12th grade.
Yikes.
Yeah, lots of schools.
That is a lot. And I know in your profession you work with children, and we'll get into that. But thinking back at yourself as a kid, how did that affect your ability to make friends? And
it was very difficult. It was very difficult. And then, yeah, I guess there were definitely schools that it was a lot easier to make friends because I had the ability to connect with people through like mutual interests. Like whenever I got into theater, the first school that I ever did theater at, I decided to get into theater because they didn't have a show choir. And it kind of grew my love for not only just music, but for acting and performing in general. But I really felt like I was able to be part of a team there.
Oh yeah, that's
and then
important.
Ended up going to college for theater and all of that. Does that answer your question?
No, it 100% does. And it segues into another thought I have about that. When did you realize that you could sing or that, this is what you wanted?
So I guess I've always really, really liked performing and singing. And I definitely have a big case of like imposter syndrome. So I've always known that I could sing well, but then, there's always going to be people who are like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's always, and on top of that, you mix that with the voices you have in your own head about, how you sound and how you will be perceived by other people.
Yeah.
And it just snowballs.
Well, and then there's like I might sound good, but first off, then I have to perceive myself. Very difficult. And then, like, I sound good as me, but I want to sound like these other artists. So, like, having to, like, step back and be like really recognize that you can have your own sound outside of the people who inspire you.
Yes. And what kind of artists inspired you?
Oh, I love Yeba. I love Aaron Allen Kane. Yes. I really like Billie Eilish. I feel like all of those artists do pretty good about either like just like making you feel something or being able to really speak their mind completely, which is something I kind of struggle with, which like it maybe doesn't show in my songs because my songs are very like
girl,
they're very much, but I have a lot of like guilt and shame about like, well, what if my opinion is different than somebody else's? You know, so I have to. It takes a lot. Like whenever I first performed Crocodile Tears, I was so nervous that like somebody was gonna hear it and be like, okay, but like you're fine. Like it not take it as like
what it was for you in that moment.
Right. And then I guess I'm also nervous about writing stories for other people because my songs are very much like my story.
Yeah.
I'm nervous about writing songs for other people's stories because what if it's a story that I don't relate to and then people are like, well, you've never even gone through that. So
like, how were you able to write about that if you haven't gone through it?
Yeah.
So it's like, you can't, with that mindset though, you can't really win for losing. Because if you can't write about your experiences, because then you're worried about if people perceive that that's, you know, a serious enough thing, or if you should really feel the way you do or be angry.
Right.
And then if you know, try to channel the feelings of someone else and musically, it's like, well, you didn't go through that.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
I mean, honestly, this is not to poo-poo it at all, because it is a thing. I mean, I have those same thoughts as well. But it's like, other people's opinions really aren't our business at the end of the day. Because you want to talk about something that will paralyze you, that'll do it.
Relying on other people to like
to know when the green light is.
And I guess the thing too is like finding the balance between taking feedback from other people and then like deciding whether or not you want to utilize that feedback in your own art.
Yeah, because there's people that you can trust as a mirror, right? And when they say something to you, you look at them and you go, I trust you as a person. I trust that you have, you know, good intentions for me, or that you're being sincere. And so I'm going to take that on. But then when somebody comes up and they reflect some stuff onto you that you don't, it's like, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
I don't know your intentions. I don't know why you would say this to me. You know, then you can kind of figure out where to put that and not let that ruminate or cycle in your mind.
Right.
You know, I'll put that in my back pocket. I'm not throwing that completely away. I'll put it in my back pocket. I'm not going to prioritize it for what I do, though.
Right.
And that is a very, very tough thing to grasp. Very much so. So what was the first song you remember writing?
Oh, I wrote a song with a friend in like 8th grade. I don't even think we finished the song.
Oh,
you know.
That's cute.
But at the time, we would, like, my whole entire choir group would go into the choir room before school started, and we would just, like, play around on the pianos. I don't even remember what the song was about. I just remember that, like, at the time, I really liked it, and we never finished it. But I guess since then, I've kind of been writing music just like here and there. Definitely a lot more lately, but it's very fun.
What is your creative process like? Like, what type of things trigger you to write, or do you do it on a regular basis? Does it seem more sporadic?
It's very sporadic. We've definitely talked about this before, but I'm very good at starting projects and not finishing them.
That's relatable content.
Yeah. So, sorry, what was the question? Ask the question one more time.
So I was asking what your creative process is like, and if it's more sporadic.
For a while, I was only really able to write songs whenever I was feeling a very intense emotion,
I get that.
like a coping skill.
I get that.
But that's not super sustainable if it's something that you like want to do full time.
I mean, unless you just like stress yourself out consistently so you can keep writing, which that doesn't end well.
So, I don't really have a process. I've actually been like playing around with a couple processes because with Crocodile Tears, that came like an event happened.
Yes.
And then I started writing like instantly because it had irritated me.
Oh, yeah.
With Wake Up, my newer song, I actually gave myself like a prompt or like I used a generator to like pull in 3 different words.
That's helpful.
Yeah. And then, I already had kind of like an idea of what I wanted to write about. So then it was just like making those words fit into my idea. I think like the first word was jacket. So I was like putting on my jacket because I got to go to work, you know. And then there were 2 other words that are actually, I think I only used 2 of the words. I think I.
And it just came out from there.
Yeah, it just, yeah.
Wow, that's really
finished,
interesting
so.
how that can just start the process for you. Those creative writing prompts.
Because even though I'm also, I struggle finishing projects, there's also times where my task initiation is not super great either. Because it's like, I know that I want to write this many songs so that I can release an album eventually. But then like, I also have definitely like a perfectionist and I can be very hard on myself. So being able to like, I don't know, initiating tasks is hard. Tasks is hard because I really want
to do well.
I want to do well.
You want it to work. You want it. You don't want to feel like you're failing at it. You want people to believe you.
Exactly.
And you know that kind of wanting the validation from your art is something a lot of people have to figure out how to navigate around. And you referred earlier to your mom's mental illness, being borderline personality disorder is what you discussed with me. And that's so fascinating. Like 2% of the people in the world have that, and it's mostly women.
Yep.
And it can, and I understand how that, you know, being kind of erratic and not having good patterns can kind of not give you a good basis on patterns too.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about how that affects your ability to function and put out art. Like how, because there's a lot of runoff that comes from that experience.
It took a really long time for me to be self-aware that I was showing borderline traits because growing up like that was so normal for me.
Right. Of
like, this is just how people react. Like sporadic behavior is normal. It's not normal. So I guess it mostly interfered with my ability to form connections with people. Like even to this day, I find it pretty difficult to be vulnerable with people and to like I will talk all day. Yeah. I'm a Gemini. I like to communicate, but just because I'm like telling you all these things about me does not mean that I'm like
that
really,
I'm giving you a piece of me at the same time.
Yeah, which is like for a while I really thought that like the oversharing part was me making connections, but that's not what it is.
Another symptom.
Yeah, it's just me like, because I'm also a verbal processor, so like I talk to like be able to figure out where my brain is. Yeah. So it's like I definitely had to be more self-aware to be able to chill out a little bit, I guess. And then I guess I'll also mention, just for the sake of my mom, after I became self-aware, I cut her off, and then she became self-aware.
See?
So
wow.
I definitely think she's growing.
That's awesome.
Which is, super awesome. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what I said about my experience of like, I didn't realize that it was not typical to be acting like that.
Right.
My mom was raised in a sporadic environment. Like, you get BPD from trauma, like it's a trauma-based thing. So I know there's some people who are like, well, I'm not gonna, like, I don't care if they went through things. I'm very much the type of person to be like, I understand all of these things that you went through. Now you're at a point where you're also growing and learning and taking my feedback, and that's really all I care about is like,
right.
Now you're safe, and now you're in a mental state to be able to grow with me rather than like
push against me
grow and
or have to cut you off completely because you refuse to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a big point. Like, I'm curious as to how, because you're so vulnerable in your songs, the songs that you write. You're able to really describe feelings very, very well. And I know that must have a lot to do with you being a verbal processor. What type of feedback have you gotten on your music that has helped encourage you?
The most humble way possible. I don't get a lot of like constructive feedback, which I feel like that kind of contradicts maybe what I said earlier. I don't know. I've gotten a lot of like, whoa, I really like this. I like this. I like my new song, Wake Up. I got a lot of like, this should be on TikTok.
I grew up in the 90s. I love a good, drum and bass, like backbeat type situation.
Yeah.
And so I love that song. And I also, while I'm vibing to it, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm like, I relate to it differently because we talked about this song. I relate to it differently than you do, but that's the beauty of your art. And one of the reasons why it's always best to detach yourself from other people's thoughts with it.
Right.
Once you put it out there, it's not yours anymore. It's out there for people to process and figure it out for themselves.
True.
You know what I'm saying? And it was really interesting talking about that song. But I hope you take that as feedback from me, that I did relate to it, even if it's different. I related to it in a very heavy way because we're all kind of feel like we're on that wheel of life.
For sure.
You wake up 5:30 a.m., hit that alarm, and you're like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? But then there's also wonderful things in this process, like community. And you've discovered a great community of other independent artists. Tell me about your experiences there.
Oh, without some of the other artists, I wouldn't be here. Just because, like, in this location. I definitely started going to what's called the Art Garden.
Yes.
At Berkeley Riverfront. At the time it was in the River Market, but that's where I met Tanner from the Garden.
The Garden DIY.
And then it just kind of flourished from there. So I met Tanner, and he had invited me to perform at one of his shows, and then I learned about the Combine, and for all of those of you, I go to the Combine every Thursday.
That's where the shoes get thrown.
Yeah, that's where all the shoes get thrown. But I kind of had to challenge myself to go to the Combine because at the time, just the social anxiety was very, very high. My best friend had just moved to Philadelphia, and I followed him here, so I'm not from Kansas City.
Yeah.
And then I was feeling very lonely. I didn't have a lot of friends at the time. So I was challenging myself to be like, well, you need people. Right. Yeah, like even if you feel like you don't need people, you need people. So days where I would get fully dressed, I would spend 2-3 hours getting ready to go to open mic or like to one of the Garden shows. And then I think there was one time I got all the way down to my car, realized I left my phone upstairs. And then I was like, well, that's a sign. I'm not going.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, I was
you
like,
take something as a sign when it's really you don't want to do this, and it gives you an excuse.
Yep.
Yeah, that's strong. I understand that.
So there were a lot of times where I got fully dressed, was completely ready to go, and then like couldn't force myself to go because I was just so anxious about, which we've talked about already, like the perception of others is really, really difficult. Especially with, and we haven't talked about this part of BPD, but people with BPD often have a really difficult time like self-actualizing. And I definitely, for a while, had struggles with that because I didn't know that I have BPD, but I know that I have traits of BPD.
Which is just like that runoff that I talk about. Like it's there's things that you end up taking on because it's what you learned.
For sure.
And then there's things that you can let go of once you learn something different.
Yep. So definitely had to really like sit down and figure out maybe not who I am, but who I want to be. That way I can morph into that person.
Yes. Start doing things today for that vision of yourself in the future. Because all of that stuff starts in the present.
True.
Rather than keeping it disconnected as something in your imagination about who I would want to be. Like, no, she can happen. She is there. I got to get to her and I got to start today. And that's like the biggest thing of moving forward and having that actualization of self.
It's also really hard to be realistic about what you want, because you could be like, I want to be a millionaire. I want to live in a mansion. And for some people that is very realistic.
If that's what makes you take 2 more steps today than you did yesterday, then do that.
True.
Focus on that. Why not? You know, and then as you go and you make those moves, you say, okay, maybe not this, but I'm getting this because I'm trying for this.
True.
You know?
That's true.
So speaking of that, when you gonna run us our album?
Well,
not to put on pressure. Not to be pressuring you.
No, because I get this question a lot, and it's definitely something that I'm working on.
Yeah.
It's using the resources that I have is something that I could be better about.
Yeah.
And then also the perfectionism of like, I've performed Crocodile Tears a million times, but I'm still in the mindset of like, is this finished? Is this what I want it to be? Because it is definitely a very pointed song.
It is a very pointed song.
It's a very pointed song.
Yeah.
The person that it's about, if they ever heard the song, would know that it's about them because it's not subtle at all. And that person is still very close to, maybe not close to me, but close to my family.
Right.
I don't know that I want to cause more friction than needs to be. And because this person does not live close by, it's like not an issue. I'm not worried about them popping up at an open mic. But I would be more worried about them like finding it on iTunes or, you know, stuff like that, and then being like,
And that's fair to an extent, but I'm going to offer this thought. I'm going to offer this thought. It's very fair, though. I get it. If you won a Grammy for that song, he would try to come to the Grammy party.
Well, maybe.
Or I'd be like, oh, I know that person. I know them. I'm just saying. People have done it. They try to show up to the Grammy party. But no, it's very fair. I completely get that. And wanting to be, you know, cognizant of connections and, you know, and
also not wanting to hurt other people.
Not wanting to hurt other people on purpose.
Because it's like, this is my perception of the event.
Which is valid.
Which, and I 100% agree that it's valid, and like how I took the situation is like, there was no other way that I was going to take the situation, but that also doesn't mean that I need to like potentially harm somebody else, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes there's discussions and things that need to happen that, you know, aren't happening in order to get to a place of peace, of saying like, this is my story, but you're also involved in this story. So how can we get there?
Right.
So that's I get that. But I mean, that's one song down, you know, 8 songs to go. So we'll get there. We'll definitely get there.
And I definitely have a lot in the works.
Yeah, I mean, like you're working on a musical. You've got
Well,
other, I mean, like, it's.
I wrote one song for a musical.
That's working on a musical. You started. And so, what is it, what I'm also wanting to know is what is it that you want your musical career to look like in the future?
Honestly, I've told a bunch of people this because I feel like a lot of the time the first thing people say to me whenever they've like heard me sing is like, why aren't you on American Idol? Blah, 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 blah. Which is like, I'm flattered that you think that I could be on that show. And not even to say that I couldn't be on that show.
No, because you could. You could stop a mud hole in everybody. If their system wasn't flawed, you could stop a mud hole.
See, and that's the thing is like, I don't want to sign a contract. Like, I know there's a lot of like, you guys sign like NDAs and stuff like that to be on that show. And we've already talked about, I'm a Gemini. I like to communicate. I'm a verbal processor. Like, if I get in a situation where I'm like irritated, I'm gonna vent. Like, I'm not good at being quiet whenever I have big emotions. Okay, so
being an independent artist is very important to you.
Yes,
and that's something that you see as a big part of your future as an artist, being able to maintain your autonomy.
For sure, and that's a big thing. Is like, for a long time, my mom would be like, you should sing this song, or you should sing, and I'm like, instantly you tell me that I should sing something, I'm never gonna do it. Like, I don't want to do it now because you just told me that like I should do this.
So I'm not gonna do it.
So like, it is very much of like a, I want to do what I want to do kind of thing, which is not always like the best.
Major Gemini stuff if I ever heard it, girl. Like,
yes, I agree. If I don't like, if I don't want to do something, I probably won't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's what my hope is, because you have so many resources available to you. I mean, including us. You know what I'm saying? Because like that's one of our main things that we value, is being able to be a resource. And so, making those connections and figuring out, what you want to do and when you want to do it. Because I know once you get your mind on it and you start, that train is going, honey.
Yeah.
So with that said, can you let people know where they can find you and keep up with you so they don't miss it?
Yes, I can. You can find me on Instagram at springday_. That's SPRXNGDAY_. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on here. I'm glad that being on the show was something that you decided you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's very fun. Thanks for helping me with all the task initiation issues.
Hey, we're here to help. We realize it, dealing with artists, everybody's different. What we got to do is what we got to do, girl.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Once again, thanks to my guest, Delaney, for being on the show today. If you had as much fun as we did, make sure that you click like, you subscribe, and ding the notification bell so you don't miss anything. New episodes of Getting Close Up air bi-weekly on Fridays. And also tune in to GCU Review, where me and Dee give you the tea on what's hot and what's not. You guys are the best part of this, and I thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you again soon for another Close Up. I'll be checking for you. Bye.